Welcome back to Punching Up. I am your host, Maya May, and we have a lot of things to punch up at. The power structures have come down on us pretty hard, and I'm trying to stay hopeful. I'm trying to believe in our future, which is why I have a Gen Z activist on the show tonight, because we said the kids were going to save us, but this time they didn't, but nobody did. That's the problem. And this crisis has been decades in the making, but they are the ones who are going to have to suffer the consequences. I joked before the show that I was like, I'll be dead before this gets really bad. And then we all laughed, ha, 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 ha. But unfortunately, the actions and the inactions of people of my generation and previous generations have brought us to a crisis point, a constitutional crisis point, a scientific crisis point. As many of you probably already know, measles is back, and we have a measles death for the first time in 10 years. Now, I'm all about being healthy. I do all of the work. I do breath work. I meditate. I go to sound baths. I do all of the new agey things, but I also get my vaccines. I get my MMR. I do all of those things. And I made sure that my child had those things too, because that's the beauty of modern medicine. And now we have this death of expertise, and it's affecting the most vulnerable, our children, the youth. And all of these decisions are being made by dinosaurs that are just, they need to go. The dinosaurs went. These dinosaurs are just staying and hanging out. And so I got to talk about it. We're going to talk about it tonight with Santiago Mayer, the founder of Voters of Tomorrow. It's our first check-in since the inauguration with Gen Z. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him onto the show. Santi, it's our first check-in since inauguration. How you doing?
Well, we're both alive, which I think is good. Means that there's still a fighting chance. So we just gotta stay alive, keep fighting, and hopefully fix up the clusterfuck that we're gonna have to deal with.
Yeah, and the clusterfuck is here. It's right now. It's very, very, very present. And you've been fighting for not just your rights, but the rights of all Americans, really, truly, for a while now. We were just talking about this before the show. How many years have you been at this now?
This is my 8th year on this, which is a very long time.
Especially given the fact that you are only, I think, what, 22 now?
23.
You're 23. All right.
Yeah.
So you are 23 years old. You've been at this basically since high school.
Yep.
When you got started in activism, did you think we'd be face to face with fascism 5 years in?
Well, I thought we were face to face with fascism 5 years ago, 8 years ago, but clearly the fascism that we were facing then is a joke compared to what we're facing now, and we still had, as much as they were collapsing, we still had systems to hold people accountable. And I think what we're seeing now is a complete and hostile takeover of the federal government by really, I mean, we have a guy who probably wears diapers and is an idiot and just sits in the Oval Office and drinks Diet Coke. And then we have an unelected billionaire running around deciding who gets to live and who gets to die, which is so un-American, so opposite to the system of government that I know my generation supports, but Americans support it in general. And listen, we were talking about this before the show, but the damage that they're causing is going to take generations to repair. And the fight really starts now. We have to contain the damage, and we have to be ready to strike back and fix it, and really to punch some Nazis in the face, because we cannot allow the hatred that they're bringing into the scene to continue and go unpunished.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad that you said the sort of the thing that people have been saying, but it's the unsaid thing, which is deciding who gets to live and who gets to die. It seems like the Republicans are playing this the weakest link goodbye kind of game, in which if you are not strong enough mentally, physically, emotionally to withstand the onslaught of their legislation, then you can just die, and that's okay. It just makes America stronger. Are you seeing that too? Because it feels like that's most damaging to young people.
Yeah, but not only is it damaging to young people in the United States, it's damaging to young people around the world. I think with PEPFAR, we have seen over 13,000 deaths since that funding was cut. And we need to be very clear on this. Those were 13,000 people who were killed by Elon Musk. These were
Mhm.
people who shouldn't have died. But Elon Musk choosing to cut USAID funding and choosing to cut funding for the Secretary of State's programs have cost these deaths. And those are only the ones from one program. I don't even want to imagine how many people have suffered or died because of all the other programs that are being cut internationally. And when we look at the United States, just last night they voted for a budget that will cut over $880 billion to Medicare. They voted for a budget that will cut hundreds of millions of dollars to SNAP, which so many people depend on. And this is just the beginning because they have been very clear that they are coming for more. They're coming for the Affordable Care Act. They're coming for Social Security. And it is on all of us to be there and to make sure that they don't win.
Well, and it's easy for Americans to turn a blind eye to what's happening outside of America, but also people have been turning a blind eye to what's happening here, to the suffering that's happening here, even in their own districts, even in their own homes in many ways, because they have voted against their interests. And while they might not be feeling the consequences of that yet, it's coming. This measles death, I think, is going to be a wake-up call, one would hope, to a lot of people. But by that time, we're running into too late territory. And so, but we've got to believe, right? We've got to believe in a brighter future. And so, what to you is the reason to keep fighting, even though it seems like no matter what we're doing right now, it's just loss after loss?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I've been very encouraged by seeing so many Trump voters going to the town halls that their elected officials are holding and telling them to take their power back, telling them that the power of the purse belongs in Congress and that they are ceding their power to an unelected billionaire. I have seen so many Trump voters tweet about losing their jobs. And as much as it pains me to say this, because many of these people like voted against me personally as an immigrant, right? I think as a party and as a movement, we have to be very clear to all these voters. They hate you. Republicans hate you. They think you're stupid. They do not respect you. And they are using you to accomplish their goals of supporting the 1%. So you realize that now you have lost your job. You have faced the consequences, the starting consequences of a Republican administration. And if you want to help us stop them, you can join us. This is a movement that's going to take all of us. And again, we are not going to agree on much, but if we can agree on the fundamental values of democracy, that we do not have a king, that we have a democratic system of government, you should join and help us stop them because it's going to take all of us.
Now, what about the young men of your generation, since we're talking about democracy versus autocracy now? I saw some really troubling numbers that young men aren't big fans of democracy. They could take it or leave it. So, since the inauguration, since the election, what has been the general feeling among young people?
Well, it really varies, right? I think the big issue that we have is that for the longest time, we have not invested in reaching young men. And this is something that me and a lot of other youth organizations and youth organizers have wanted to do. But unfortunately, the funding just hasn't been there. And it has been an issue for a really long time that we have been racing to funders and to donors, telling them that Turning Point USA, that the Daily Caller, that Breitbart and OAN are making very significant investments to reach young men. You see it, you saw it throughout the Trump campaign, right? They were in podcasts, they were at the UFC. We do not have a response to that. And the longer that it takes us to put one together, the more difficult it is going to be for us to climb those people back. At the same time, these young men are not attracted to autocracy because they like autocracy. They're attracted to autocracy because they have seen democracy fail them over and over and over again, as we have both, I think, seen democracy fail us. And it is incumbent upon those of us who believe in democracy to show that the system can work. A lot of people came out and voted for lower prices. They voted because they wanted a brighter future. They wanted to afford a house. And those are exactly the things that Republicans are leaving on the chopping block. In the budget that we were just talking about, do you want to know what's not included? There is not a single clause that's going to make groceries cheaper. There's not a single clause that's going to make housing cheaper. There's not a single clause that will get rid of the tax on tips, which was the landmark proposal that Donald Trump was running with. And I think that if we are able to put this in front of people, which I believe we're able to do, and if we can show them a bold proposal for how democracy can actually deliver these things to them, it is not going to be difficult for us to get their support back. They have been failed by the institutions, and Donald Trump is offering to burn them. We have to be the ones that are offering to reform them in a way that's going to work for them.
So the institutions have failed them as much as they've failed us, as you mentioned, right? And Republicans have managed to shift the blame onto Black and brown people, onto trans people, onto LGBTQ people in general, and who knows who else they're going to, on immigrants. How then, because they have this community, they have the broverse? What is it? The
manosphere.
Manosphere. Like, I can't go into the manosphere. Right. It's not my place. So do we have the numbers? Do we have enough? Who are the voices that they will listen to? Because I feel like it's like, okay, there's the Tony Robbins of the world and all of these different influencers, but how many of these influencers are speaking about empathy? I see Ryan Holiday does it, and a few, but it seems like even when they do it, they're viewed as weak, as soy boys. I'm learning the terminology because I have a teenager. But how does one crack into the manosphere when it seems like the manosphere is about exclusion? Really, it's like they're so excited to find a place to belong that they can't wait to exclude anyone that contradicts that right. space. And that means like empathy does not belong in the manosphere because it's very Cobra Kai. It's very no mercy. Tell me, how do we crack the, and do you watch Cobra Kai? Can we go off topic for a little bit?
I have not watched Cobra Kai. My brother's a big fan though, so I have heard some about it. Listen, I think that it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge, but it is not a challenge that we cannot tackle. And I think the issue right now is that the focus is on the wrong thing. So many people, I keep having these conversations, and they ask me, who is the Joe Rogan on the left? And I think it's something that's very important to make clear to especially older people that might not be plugged into these spaces is that Joe Rogan is not a political podcast. Joe Rogan talks about sports. He talks about exercise. He talks about dating. He talks about health. Politics is kind of in the background of it. He presents all of this with a conservative angle, mostly because he's an idiot that's going to repeat whatever the last guest said. But when we talk about it, we can't be thinking of how are we creating a political podcast, because that's not what people are interested in. I think when we're talking about how we crack these spaces, it's not about exactly penetrating them. It's much more about creating alternative communities that all these men that are looking for belonging can go to. And these are not communities that are going to be centered on politics. They're going to be centered on self-improvement. They're going to be centered on succeeding in life. And the question is how we embed politics into that. And I think there's a lot of comedy podcasts, of health podcasts, of business podcasts and entrepreneurship that do talk about these things from a left-wing angle and with a liberal perspective. And it is, again, really to go back to what I was saying, incumbent on all of us to find these outlets, elevate them, and make sure that the same way that Republican politicians will go on Joe Rogan, we are going on these channels. We are talking to their audiences and we're helping expand their audiences. Because a political ad is never going to change the mind of someone whose entire identity is based on belonging to the manosphere. The only way that we're actually going to extract them from there, and in a lot of ways really de-radicalize them, is by giving them an alternative choice. They have to choose to be better. And a lot of them will, but we have to make sure that that environment exists for them.
This sounds like a really good strategy. And you're 23. And we have people like James Carville, who seem to think that because you're 23, you don't know what you're talking about, and that this game should be run by people who have 20, 30 years of experience. Let's talk about James Carville, because he said Dems need a strategy pause to roll over and play dead for a while. You have opinions about this, I know. Should we play dead? Should we roll over?
Yeah, I mean, let's just let Republicans tear the country apart. What does it matter? It's not like minorities are going to get hurt. It's not like young people are going to get hurt. It's not like the LGBTQ community and women are going to get hurt, right? All these people are disposable, according to James Carville. And listen, I respect his work in electing Bill Clinton. That was 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. James Carville has not won an election, has not worked in a successful election in my lifetime. So for him to go on with his sports jersey from his porch, telling Democrats what they need to do, is actually kind of ridiculous. Because I do not understand why we are listening to the strategic advice of someone whose last successful election was run before the internet existed.
Ouch.
The environment has changed, and James Carville wants to believe that it is still the 90s. And I get it. The 90s were great. I didn't experience it. I'm sad that I didn't experience it. I get it. But it is not the 90s anymore. It is the year of our Lord 2025. And politics are very different. So no, we should not take a strategic pause, because a strategic pause means accepting the harm of people that do not deserve it. We need to be out there. We need to be blocking. We need to take a page out of Mitch McConnell's book and every single day wake up with the goal as to how we're going to delay these things, because we might not be able to stop them, but every second that we delay is a life that we are saving. And if we want to be an opposition force, if we want to stand up for democracy, if we want to stand up for our values, we have to prioritize saving lives. We have to prioritize helping the people who are at risk. And we can't do that just because we can't not do that just because it's not going to score us political points. The goal of politics is to help people. Politics and getting power for power's sake is how we got to this point. The goal of having power is to improve people's lives. And if we are not doing that, we're failing as a movement, and we do not deserve to be in power. So it is, just to wrap, it is absolutely insulting for someone who, again, has not won an election in my lifetime to come out and say, oh, we can let some people die because it's going to be better for us politically. No, it's not, because that's not the point of politics. And if James Carville doesn't understand that, he should get out of politics.
No, exactly that. I mean, public service is about serving. And so this idea that people should have to die before they learn and make a difference. It's like, first of all, I understand hitting rock bottom. It's something I think about all the time. And I go, oh, okay, are people not going to seek change until they hit a true rock bottom, which means actual physical pain and loss for their families? I understand that sentiment and that idea that people won't learn until that happens, but the goal should be to keep that, to prevent that from happening. And this idea that power, absolute power, staying in power hasn't necessarily given us what we'd like it to deliver. And Someone who has been elected in 30 years is Maxwell Frost, who is one of my favorite young Gen Z politicians. We have a clip of him. I want to roll that real quick. Sam, could you?
The grifter-in-chief Trump and President Musk are openly using their public offices to enrich themselves to the tune of billions of dollars. So if we want to look at waste, fraud, and abuse, which I'm down to do, why is there complete silence on the other side of the aisle about looking at the complete grifter that is the president of the United States and the richest man on the earth, which is looking into things like Social Security and different things like that? Why don't we investigate the real corruption?
Out of order, apparently, to talk about corruption. Out of order to call the president a grifter when he's an actual grifter. This kind of energy. Can you talk about this scene? I mean, this is someone of your generation. Do we need more of this? Is Carville missing the boat when we can see this instead of mentoring and getting fundraising for these kind of candidates? Like, tell me what you'd like to see from older strategists, more experienced strategists around Gen Z politicians like this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Maxwell's a friend, and I could not be prouder of the work that he is doing, really showing why it's important to have Gen Z in Congress, because the energy and the fight that he is bringing, not just to that hearing, but to every hearing that he has been in and to all the protests that they have been holding outside the departments that are getting attacked by Elon Musk, is so incredible and really just what the energy that we should be seeing from every elected Democrat. I think, listen, right, there's clearly a generational divide here. And I think it comes down to what role do we think institutions serve in this country? I think people like Maxwell, people like me, I think people like you, just for the sake of existing. And we have an older group of strategists that really is focused on just conserving the institutions and conserving the status quo because that's all we've ever known. They are, in a way, scared of thinking beyond that. On the right, though, we are seeing people burn down the system and burn down the institutions. And that is clearly appealing to voters who know and feel that the institutions have failed them. So we need more Democrats like Maxwell. We need more Democrats who are going to talk about how institutions are failing and who are going to present actual ideas, big, bold ideas as to how we're going to reform these institutions to work for people. James Carville, I'm sure, has a lot of love for USAID and for the Secretary of State and for all of the agencies that were created over the last 100 years. I do. But if those agencies are not working for people in the United States, we're not going to see voters understand the work that they do, even if it's really good work. What we need from older strategists is the guidance, is the fight, is the experience. And so far, we have seen a lot of them who really want to prioritize maintaining the appearance of order rather than actually getting us back to order. And listen, Maxwell might have been out of order in that. I don't think that calling the president a grifter and the richest man alive, who's the actual president and an oligarch, is out of order. What is out of order is pretending that this is not happening and that there is not a hostile takeover of our government. And until the older strategists, the people with money, the people with power and influence understand that and understand that Democrats, by and large, are ready to stand up and fight, and they direct that fight into tangible actions, we're going to continue to see this chaos.
Well said. Speaking of the issues, obviously Gen Z is not a monolith, but what are some of the issues that they can come together on and use that power?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mentioned that a big priority for Gen Z is the cost of living and housing, right? For the longest time, we were told that we would have a better life than our parents, that every generation was more prosperous, more wealthy than the one before. What we can see right now is that very clearly the American dream has failed. It is not something that young people can aspire to anymore. Owning a house, having a family, building a life where you are treated with dignity and respect by your employer, and where you make enough to sustain yourself without needing other jobs, that is gone. And it is gone because of people like Elon Musk, because the 1% continues to hoard every penny that this country produces and pay their workers with scraps. We need reform in this country, and we need reform that's going to have people like Elon Musk pay their due, and it's going to give the people most at need the resources that they need to succeed. We need to build housing to lower the prices of housing in states like California and states like Illinois. We're seeing so many people move to red states because blue states are becoming increasingly unaffordable. And this is not only an issue for young people, this is an issue for all of us. And until we solve that, until we elect people who want to develop housing, who want to fix these systems, who want to actually hold the 1% accountable and make sure that a person cannot hoard $500 billion, is so important. The wealth divide is bigger today than it was during the French Revolution when the wealthy had their heads chopped off. And if that's not an indictment of the system that we're working under, if that is not a red flashing light telling us that we need reform, then I don't know what is.
I saw a trucker on Twitter. He's got a big following. He was bragging about the fact that it was like a flex that he worked 63 hours a week, drove, I think, 2,300 plus miles. And I asked myself, this was all in response to federal workers not necessarily wanting to respond to that ridiculous email asking them what they did. And I was like, well, this is an interesting flex, but it begs the question, wasn't technology supposed to reduce the amount of hours that we are supposed to work so that we can spend time with our families? You know, the reason for being, and one shouldn't have to work 60 plus hours a week in order to be able to provide for their families. Also, isn't it dangerous to have a truck driver on the road for 60 plus hours? And so you're putting other families in danger.
I mean, listen, we're seeing what's happening with the planes. The planes weren't falling out of the sky when DI was in there.
Exactly. But, and so I want to say, so when things get automated, because I read about deep machine learning ways back, and I was like, oh, the amount of people who are going to be put out of work because they're hoarding this money at the top as opposed to reinvesting this money. The people who are, and Bernie Sanders talks about it a lot, the people who are doing well because of AI and technology, they're people who are already wealthy. And so I think about when I was, you weren't around for the 90s, but I was. And when I graduated college, a 2-bedroom apartment on the north side of Chicago was, I think, $900 a month. $900 a month. And I think my starting salary, just as like a desk job, I was like an executive assistant, was like $40,000 a year. That's basically now still what somebody's being paid, but that same apartment is like, I don't know, probably like $2,500 a month.
If that. I mean, I think a good indicator of this is really the price of education. And I'll say I went to a state school, right? I went to Cal State Long Beach, go Beach. And we had this conversation with a professor who also went to Cal State Long Beach, obviously decades before us. And I think I can summarize this with a single sentence. What we paid for parking was his entire tuition.
Jesus.
Our 1 semester parking pass, $600. That's what he paid for tuition.
That's insane. Yeah.
It is ridiculous how expensive things have gotten compared to wage growth. And the reason wages aren't growing, the reason things are so expensive is because corporations no longer care about contributing to society. Billionaires, you don't see billionaires building libraries and parks anymore. And that's because in the past, there was a sense that you had this much wealth and it was on you to use this wealth to contribute to society, to pay it back. That is gone. And if they are not going to regulate themselves, it is incumbent upon government to regulate them, because no single human should have $500 billion. That is more than most countries and GDPs.
And if you say that to the average Republican voter right now, they're going to say, yeah, but he worked hard for it. Elon Musk deserves it. He worked hard for it. Jeff Bezos worked for it. And they're defending these people who are taking away their rights. So you've said this online that Republicans hate their voters. When are Republican voters going to realize that? What is it going to take for them to realize that?
Well, I think there's this famous phrase that says if you give a man someone to hate, they're not going to realize it when you're picking their pocket. And I think that is as true today as it has ever been. Republicans continue to point towards immigrants, towards people of color, towards the LGBTQ community, and saying they are the reason why the American dream has failed. When in reality, it is the Republican donors who have caused the American dream to fail. So, yes, Republicans hate their voters. They think their voters are dumb. You can see it in every single one of these town hall videos. These are people begging their representatives to do their job and represent them. These are people begging for their lives, for their jobs. And Republicans are laughing. They are smiling. They are making jokes at the expense of these people's futures and their present. And I think what we are seeing now is really indicative of that veil starting to lift over a lot of people's eyes. What we have seen on social media with so many Trump voters being outspoken about the fact that they have lost their jobs. And in my eyes, it is selfish for them to be like, hey, yeah, go hurt other people, but don't hurt me. At the same time, I think, to your point, many people will need to hit rock bottom for them to realize. And I do not want these people to suffer. I do not wish them ill. But I think that a lot of them are going to have to find this out the hard way. And as difficult as it is going to be for us Democrats to do this, we're going to have to be there ready to welcome them. And we're going to have to be there ready to bring them into the coalition and point them towards the people who are actually working for them. Point them towards the actual solutions to their problems. Because trust me, deporting 11 million people, many of whom are legal immigrants paying taxes, and a lot of undocumented immigrants who are paying taxes that they will never get to benefit from. Those are not the people that are making you suffer. It is the billionaires, it is Elon Musk, it is Jeff Bezos. And until we control their wealth, until we control the wealth divide in this country, and until we reinvest the money that they are hoarding into society, things are not going to improve.
Can everybody take this clip and send this into the group chat, please? Your Republican relatives need to see it. I needed to get to that part of the internet. Exactly everything you just said, Santi. I want to wrap this on a hopeful note, a looking into the future note. They have their plan. They had their 50-year plan to overturn Roe v. Wade, and we can see what they're trying to overturn now. What is our 50-year plan? Do we have one? When do we start to work on it?
Well, I don't have 50 years, but I do have 2.
Okay.
And it is very important for all of us to be aware of the places where we can make an impact. Right now, there is a get out the vote effort in Wisconsin. They have an election for the Supreme Court on April 1st. And whoever wins that election is going to determine control of the Supreme Court. We can have a court that's going to stand up for abortion rights, that's going to stand up for voting rights, that's going to maintain the ungerrymandered maps that the previous Supreme Court imposed. Or we can let Elon Musk buy this election because he just put in millions of dollars to buy this seat for the Republican candidate. There are Supreme Court elections in Pennsylvania this November that are just as important. And obviously, there are elections for mayor in New York. Eric Adams has made it clear that he is nothing more than a lackey for Trump. We have Andrew Cuomo, who apparently thinks people might have forgotten that he sexually assaulted a few people and wants to be mayor now. There are elections in Virginia that are going to determine control of both the legislature and the governor's mansion, which, side note, Glenn Youngkin is thrilled that his constituents are losing their jobs. I don't know if anyone saw the clip, but he is saying that there's going to need to be some suffering for Virginians to make the government more effective, which I don't know if I would be saying that if I was the governor of Virginia. but there are elections in Virginia, there are elections in New Jersey, there are special elections happening across the country, in Florida, in New York, for Stefanik's seat, for Gates' seat, for Walz's seat, and obviously we have the midterms last year. And I might be slightly too optimistic, but I think that with the efforts that Voters of Tomorrow is preparing, with the efforts that our partners are preparing, I feel really strongly that we will be able to bring back the youth coalition that fueled the blue waves in 2018 and 2020, that we will be able to bring back the youth coalition that prevented Democrats from being wiped out in 2022, and that we will be able to not just retake the House by a slim majority, but retake the House by a majority big enough where we will be able to not only hold the Trump administration accountable, but we will be able to start showing people the type of bold policies that Democrats support to improve people's lives.
That's the kind of energy I want. That's the kind of energy I need. I love it. It's like, if this is choose your own adventure, this is another opportunity. These elections coming up. Both of us speak Spanish for Spanish speakers, and we know that elegir, election, same root word, and it's choose, to choose.
Yep.
I always say they should call elections the choosing. And then maybe people would realize this is where we're choosing our future. And so I choose this future that you've laid out for us. I am optimistic. So everyone, you can check out Santiago's work at votersoftomorrow.org. You can volunteer. You can donate.
Donate, please. I was just talking. We have incredible partners. We have incredible plans. We do not have Elon Musk giving us millions of dollars. We do not have Peter Thiel giving us millions of dollars, which means that every penny that we spend is not just going to be matched by the right. It's going to be significantly exceed whatever it is that we have. So every dollar that you can donate is a dollar that's going to go directly into mobilizing and, yes, persuading young voters, because young voters are not a turnout demographic anymore. It is not just an audience where we can just register them and turn them out. We have to talk to them and tell them who is best for them. We have to help them make their choice. And that is very, very expensive proposition. So please, if you have $5, $10, $15 to spare, go to votersoftomorrow.org/donate and chip in. And I can guarantee you that your money will make an impact, and it will help not just get Elon Musk out of the White House, but also probably shut up a lot of your most hated Republicans who think that they now have a huge majority. They do not, and we're going to prove that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Santi. We will check back in with you sooner than later. I love these conversations. It gives me hope. So thanks for being here with Punching Up tonight, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
So I love this energy, and I think it's really important to remember, like Santiago said, these Trump voters who are realizing now they're in that find out stage, that we do have to meet them with empathy, and empathy takes work. It's actual cognitive work to be empathetic, especially to somebody who may not agree with a lot of what is important to you, like having rights. But we do have to figure out how to expand our tent and welcome them in. And so I want everybody to flex their empathy muscle, and less gloating, more empathy, inviting them in, and you could give them a stern look like, we tried to warn you, and you brought us to this place, but come on into the tent. It's nice and warm and cozy here. Here's some hot cocoa and some rights. That's all we got to do. And one other thing I want to leave you with is the language that we need to talk to these wellness folks with, the manosphere. I know a little bit of the gym language. I know a little bit of the self-help language, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. The growth mindset is the one that Democrats actually have it, saying, hey, we can improve things. We can talk about what is complicated and complex and terrible about American history and work on ourselves and improve, versus the fixed mindset, which is like, oh, I don't want to look at the bad things of the past. I want to pretend that that never happened. And then you never grow and evolve. And so you can ask some of your friends who maybe fallen down that pipeline into right-wing fascism and ask them, is fascism growth mindset or fixed mindset? I think it might be a fixed mindset. Maybe that'll plant a little bit of seed. That's the language they speak. So thank you for being here with me in Santiago tonight on Punching Up. We have a lot of other great shows. Please check them out. The Enemies List Trippy Show, the LP Podcast, Decoding Fox News. And then I'll be back here next week again, because we're still going to be alive. That's the goal right now, is living to see another day and another week. So get those vaccinations while you can, y'all. I've been Maya May. This has been Punching Up. I'll see you soon.